Chapter 9. The first dawn of the new week unfolded like a golden tapestry over Eden, washing the garden in radiant splendor. The rivers gleamed like molten sapphire, reflecting the soft blush of morning, while the trees stretched heavenward, their emerald leaves drinking in the light of a sun that had never known sorrow. Adam and Eve awoke in each other's arms, the warmth of the Sabbath lingering in their hearts. The air was thick with the perfume of blossoms, the promise of the day wrapped in the whispering breeze. Birds trilled their morning songs, calling the earth to rise, to awaken, to be. And they, the firstborn of creation, rose to meet it. The work of their hands would begin today, not labor, not toil, but creation. They were image bearers, after all, designed not merely to exist, but to make. Raphael was already waiting for them, his emerald wings folded neatly at his back, his expression bright with quiet delight. He had walked these paths before them, studied the veins of every leaf, traced the rivers that wove their way through the land. And now, he would teach them. Together, they explored Eden's hidden wonders, the shaded groves where fireflies slept beneath silken petals, the winding streams where silver fish leapt like flickering stars. Raphael showed them the delicate balance of creation, how the trees breathed in harmony with the sky, how the rivers nourished the earth, how the creatures moved in a rhythm older than time itself. And Adam and Eve listened. They learned. They marveled at the language of the birds, at the way the lion walked with gentle strength, at the dance of the wind through the valley. They named, they built, they shaped their home with joyful hands, molding the land with love. But as the day stretched toward its zenith, another visitor arrived. Selaphiel. He came not with wisdom, but with delight, his copper-colored wings catching the sun as he landed with effortless grace. "You have built with your hands," he said, mischief dancing in his golden eyes. "Now let us build with vision." And with that, he unfurled something from the folds of his robe. A sheet, thin as gossamer, yet strong as woven light. It shimmered faintly, not like mere paper, but as if it carried within it the breath of the heavens themselves. This was no ordinary parchment. It was made of something beyond earth, a celestial fabric woven in the workshops of the Most High, a parchment of heaven. In his other hand, he held a slender instrument, a quill, though not of feather nor reed. It gleamed as if it were spun from liquid gold, the tip fine as a breath of wind. When he turned it ever so slightly, the light refracted through it, revealing an ink unlike any found in Eden. It was no simple dye, no mere pigment crushed from berries or pressed from flowers. It was living ink, imbued with divine essence, shimmering between hues of dawn and deep sapphire, shifting like the morning sky before the first light touches the earth. He placed them before Eve. "What do you see?" he asked. Eve hesitated. The moment the quill touched her fingertips, something stirred inside her. A quiet pulse, a sutago paras. She glanced at Adam. Their home was all around them, limitless, breathtaking, alive. And yet, something unseen pressed against the edges of her mind, waiting. She looked at the shimmering parchment before her. At first, it was blank, still, empty. But as she stared, the vision unfurled. It had always been there, she realized, waiting in the hush of her soul, a song unheard until now, a home. Not just for them, but for the ones who would come after. A place of warmth, of laughter, of life. A place where children's feet would run through golden fields, where voices would rise in song, where love would take root and stretch toward eternity. Her breath caught. Without another moment's hesitation, she began to write. Not only trees and rivers, not only the garden in all its splendor, but the future. Adam watched her hands move, his chest tightening with something deep and wordless. She saw it too. His fingers brushed against hers as he leaned in, watching the shapes take form. His breath was slow, steady, but his pulse quickened. His hand settled over hers for the briefest moment, grounding himself in what he was seeing. This was more than a dream, more than possibility. It was a promise, a future not yet written, but already living in the quiet space between their hearts. Selaphiel, usually so quick with laughter, stilled. His copper wings shivered, just slightly, but enough that the light caught on their edges, making them shimmer like burnished gold. For the first time, the angel who danced among the stars was silent. And when he finally spoke, his voice was softer, reverent. "Ah," he breathed as though in awe, "that is vision." Adam and Eve looked up, and in Selaphiel's gaze, there was something deep, a flicker of wonder, of recognition. Even the angels had not foreseen this, and yet here it was, etched upon the parchment of heaven, a glimpse of what was to come. And so, together, Adam and Eve inscribed their dreams upon the celestial page. The future was vast, unshaped, but their love had already begun to build it. The river murmured in hushed tones as twilight unfurled its velvet embrace across Eden. Fireflies stirred in the dimming light, their golden glow flickering like whispered promises, while the first stars pierced the sky like scattered embers from heaven's hearth. The world felt weightless in the hush of evening, as if time itself had slowed to listen. Adam and Eve sat at the water's edge, feet submerged in the cool, crystalline current. Eve traced idle circles along the surface with her fingertips, watching ripples bloom outward like the petals of an unseen flower. The scent of blooming jasmine wove through the air, wrapping around them in a breath of sweetness. "I love this time of day," Eve murmured, leaning her head against Adam's shoulder. Adam smiled. "Why?" She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because the sky is never the same twice. It's always changing, always new. Look." She pointed, and Adam followed her gaze to where the last blush of sunlight melted into the horizon, a watercolor of violet and gold. Every color, every hue. It's a painting that never repeats. Adam chuckled, threading his fingers through hers. "You notice everything." Eve tilted her head toward him, teasing. "Isn't that what I'm meant to do?" He laughed softly, squeezing her hand. "Yes, and I hope you never stop." They sat in contented silence, the river playing its gentle melody, the air thick with the breath of night-blooming flowers. It was then, in the quiet of that sacred moment, that Adam's voice turned solemn. "There is something I wish to speak of," he murmured. Eve lifted her head, sensing the shift in his tone. She watched him intently, the fading light casting a golden glow across his face. "The tree," Adam said, his gaze settling somewhere distant, beyond the canopy of stars. Eve followed his line of sight. She had seen it before, beautiful, untouched, its fruit gleaming with an otherworldly light. It did not stand apart in darkness or shadow, but rather in purpose. "I do not fear it," she said softly. "You shouldn't," Adam assured her. "It was never placed here to frighten us." "Then why was it placed at all?" Adam exhaled, running a hand through his hair before meeting her gaze. "A test." Eve frowned. "A test?" Adam nodded. "A reminder, a covenant, a pledge of love." His voice lowered. "Not his love for us, for that has never been in question, but ours for him." Eve was quiet, listening. "Every day we choose him," Adam continued. "Every sunrise we wake to, every fruit we taste, every step we take through this garden, it is all given. Freely. We did not ask for breath, yet he gave it. We did not ask for the rivers, yet they flow for us. We did not ask for love, yet he wove it into the very fabric of our being." Eve's gaze softened. "But love," true love is not love unless it is given back." The words sent a gentle shiver through her, as if they carried weight beyond what she could yet understand. Adam looked at the tree again. We are not bound to him like the stars are bound to the sky. We are not tethered like the rivers to their course. We are free. His voice dipped lower, full of quiet reverence. But freedom is only real if there is something to walk away from. Eve glanced toward the tree once more. "To love him," Adam whispered, "is to choose him." A silence stretched between them, and in that stillness, something within Eve settled. It was not a test of punishment. It was a test of love. And love, if it is love at all, must always be chosen. She turned to Adam, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "I would choose him 1,000 times over." A smile tugged at his lips, reverent and sure. "So would I." And just like that, the solemn weight of the moment lifted, giving way to laughter once more. Eve leaned back on her hands, grinning. "Tell me," she mused, "if we could name every star, would we ever run out of words?" Adam chuckled. "I think we'd run out of breath first." Eve gasped dramatically. "Are you saying there are things even you cannot do?" Adam groaned, throwing his hands up. "I built an entire stable for the horses in one day, and yet you still question my abilities." Eve smirked, arching a brow. "A true leader should be tested." Adam shot her a look before tackling her into the soft grass, his laughter mingling with hers as fireflies burst upward, swirling around them in a golden dance. And in that moment, beneath the endless sky, eternity felt as if it had already begun. As the night deepened, Eve slipped away into the garden, leaving Adam lying beneath the canopy of stars. She wandered through the moonlit trees, drawn forward by a feeling she could not name. It was as if something had been waiting for her, a treasure hidden in plain sight. Then she saw it. A fruit unlike any other. Its color pulsed like a captured sunrise, warm and golden with hues of soft pink and deep amber. A fragrance rose from it, something almost musical, as if its scent itself was a song. Carefully, reverently, she plucked it from the branch. She turned, cradling it in her hands, and made her way back. When Adam saw her approaching, his breath caught. She knelt beside him, offering the fruit with a smile that outshone the stars. "I wanted you to have the first taste." Adam sat up slowly, taking the fruit from her hands. It was warm, almost as if it were still alive, the scent intoxicating. He took a bite. The juices burst across his tongue, sweet, rich, unlike anything he had ever tasted. It was warmth. It was light. It was something deeper than mere flavor. Eve giggled at his stunned expression. "Is it good?" Adam swallowed, blinking. Then he let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. "Good is not enough." He turned to her, voice full of quiet awe. "It is perfect." Eve grinned, pleased. Then it was worth the search. Adam watched her for a long moment. Then, reaching out, he cupped her cheek in his palm, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. His voice dropped to a whisper. "There is no fruit in Eden sweeter than you." Eve's breath hitched. For a fleeting moment, all of Eden vanished. The rivers, the trees, the stars, all blurred into the background. There was only this, only them. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. And for the first time, Eve understood something she had never before been able to name. Love was not merely given. It was discovered. And somewhere far beyond Eden, in a realm swallowed by shadow, Lucifer seethed. Beyond the golden veil of Eden, beyond the shimmer of heaven's gates, a gathering of ruin took place. Not in the courts of light, not in the presence of the Almighty, but in the vast, unholy chasm where glory had been stripped away, where radiance had withered into shadow. It was a place that should not exist, a place that had never been, until now. The air was thick with something unnamed, something heavy, the kind of silence that does not rest, but writhes, that seethes, and at its center stood Lucifer. Once, he had ruled among the stars. Now, he ruled over nothing. A vast host surrounded him, those who had once shone with divine fire, those who had once stood in the sapphire courts of God, who had once lifted their voices in praise that shook the heavens. But there was no music now. Only discord, only rage. Only the gnawing, ceaseless ache of loss. Lucifer lifted his gaze to the void above. The hour of worship had come and gone. And for the first time, his voice had not been the first note. Once, he had led the great symphony of heaven. He had raised the first melody, and all the angelic host had followed. Every creature, every star, every throne and dominion had trembled beneath the weight of the song. But now, nothing. The realization struck him like an iron weight to the chest. For the first time since eternity had begun, heaven sang without him. Lucifer's fingers twitched, curling into fists. He could almost hear it, the distant holy chorus, the seamless harmonies of angels bowing before the Almighty. The Sabbath song, the song he had once begun. It should have been his voice that carried the first note, but he was not there, and he never would be again. Had it all been a mistake? The thought slipped through the cracks of his mind, unbidden and unwanted. But it was there, curling like smoke, whispering its wretched what-ifs. For a fleeting moment, the weight of regret pressed down upon him, sharp and suffocating. Had he been wrong? Had he doomed them all? Lucifer closed his eyes, but it did not stop the memories from rising. Michael's voice, calm, unwavering, full of sorrow. You grieve what you lost, not what you have done. You desire the kingdom, but not the king. It is over, Lucifer. Lucifer's throat tightened. He had begged. He, the morning star, had pleaded. And Michael had wept. Tears for him. Tears, but no mercy. You cannot return. Lucifer's eyes snapped open, burning with hatred. There would be no sorrow, no repentance, only war. His wings flared, his presence dark and commanding. The shadows trembled beneath him. He would not bow. If he could not return, then neither shall Adam and Eve remain in favor. He turned his gaze to his fallen host, and for the first time, he truly looked at them. Their once glorious forms were dimmed, their radiance reduced to embers. Their faces were restless, uncertain, their wings frayed by the weight of what they had lost. They were not as they were, not as he had promised. They had followed him into exile, into war, believing in his vision of a new kingdom. And now they were nothing, and they knew it. Doubt rippled through them like a plague. A voice rose from the ranks, hesitant, uncertain. What have we done? Lucifer's jaw tightened. This is not what you promised. A murmur spread, low and seething. You said we would reign. Lucifer's wings twitched, his fingers curling into fists. You said we would be gods. The accusation was a whisper, but it was enough. Something cold and violent ignited in Lucifer's chest. The abyss trembled. His wings flared wide, shadows curling at their edges. And when he spoke, his voice carried through the chasm with a power that shattered the silence. We are gods. His eyes burned, twin stars of wrath and defiance. Or have you forgotten? A hush fell. Lucifer stepped forward, his presence a force, his gaze burning into those who dared to doubt. We were cast out of heaven, yes. We have been thrown from the heights of glory. His lip curled, his voice low and venomous. But do you truly believe the Almighty is finished with us? that he has simply replaced us with flesh and dust? He turned, sweeping his gaze over the restless throng. They walk with him, he sneered, voice laced with venom. He delights in them. The words twisted in his throat. He has given them everything. But mark my words, they do not understand the price of what they have been given. A flicker of interest passed through the host. Lucifer's voice deepened, dripping with cunning. They have not been tested. A silence, then a shift, a realization. Somewhere in the abyss, one of the fallen exhaled sharply. Lucifer pressed on. They are untouched by suffering. They are bound to him only because they know nothing else. They have no knowledge of the other path. He let the words settle, let them take root. And then with a slow, deliberate smile, he whispered, "But they will." The abyss trembled. They are free, are they not? Lucifer continued, his voice velvet and sharp as a dagger. Free to love him. He tilted his head, free to choose. A flicker of understanding passed through the fallen. Then let them choose. Lucifer's wings stretched, his presence growing darker, vaster, consuming. If we cannot storm the gates of heaven, then we shall turn the garden of delight into a kingdom of dust. One of his captains hesitated, but they are untouchable. Lucifer's gaze snapped toward him. No one is untouchable. His voice was iron, final. They think they are safe, but they are wrong. Lucifer's lips curled, the ember of a smile flickering at the corner of his mouth. Because I know something they do not. The fallen waited, breathless. And then, softly, so softly it was almost a whisper, Lucifer said, "Love is only love if it is tested." The words hung in the air like a blade. And as they sank in, the host of the fallen began to stir. The murmurs of doubt faded. A new hunger took its place. Lucifer exhaled, satisfied. For the first time since his exile, he did not feel like a king without a kingdom. He felt like a conqueror. And as the abyss trembled and the stars wept, the first shadow of doom stretched its hand toward Eden. It had begun. The stars had barely begun their watch when the Godhead gathered in the sapphire court. It was a place untouched by time, a realm where eternity pulsed like a living force, where the foundations of existence were written into the very air. Here, the presence of the Father, Son, and Spirit converged in divine accord. At the center of all things burned the throne of the Ancient of Days, veiled in a brilliance no created being could endure. The great rainbow encircling the throne in its undying hues shimmered like a living covenant, bending across the expanse of the crystalline sea, a sea not made of water, but of glass and fire, reflecting past, present, and eternity, yet to unfold. The air hummed with infinite knowledge. The stars beyond trembled, and before the throne of the Almighty stood the Son, Michael, the commander, not flesh, yet visible. The Word before the Word became flesh, not created, yet present. The one through whom all things were made, not bound to form, yet embodied. The visible image of the invisible God. His radiance was like a sword unsheathed, power wrapped in humility, the fire of justice tempered by the depths of mercy. His gaze, steady as the pillars of eternity, bore the weight of what he had seen. He had returned from Eden, and he was silent. The Spirit moved beside him, unseen, yet wholly present. He hovered, just as he had at the dawn of time, when he had stirred the deep and called forth creation from the void. His voice was a whisper that echoed through the soul of eternity. It begins. Michael's eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them, galaxies burned within their depths. He turned toward the one seated upon the throne. I have walked among them. His voice was steady as the tide, unwavering as the laws of the heavens. They are pure. Their love for you is unshaken. A pause. The weight of eternity trembled in the air. But Lucifer watches. The light surrounding the throne of the Father pulsed, not in alarm, not in surprise, but in the quiet, unshaken certainty of all-knowing. And then, the voice of the Almighty, rich as the foundation of all things, woven with the very essence of existence, filled the court. He will not wait long. The son's jaw tightened. No. For though the fallen prince had played at patience, his heart had already decided. He would move. And soon. Across the vast assembly, a figure stepped forward. A warrior of gold and flame, his presence like a living wall against darkness. Gabriel, the mightiest among the angelic host. The sword of heaven, the unshaken shield. He knelt before the throne, golden robes glistening like the sun upon the sea. His voice was steady, but beneath his words, there was fire. Then let me go to them. His gaze burned with unrelenting resolve. Let me guard them. For he had warred against the fallen one before, and he would do so again. The Father's presence rippled like a vast tide, washing over the court with infinite wisdom. They must stand. Gabriel bowed his head, his jaw tightening. He did not question, but the weight of the decree was heavy. Beside him, another angel stepped forward. His countenance was not as fire, but as the glow of the endless stars. His robes were woven with the shimmer of time itself, the markings of past and future whispering against his form like moving constellations. Cassiel, the watcher of time. His voice was low, measured, carrying the echoes of eternity. We must warn them. The spirit hovered over the sea of glass, and the waters stirred. Yes, the decree was given. 2 angels would go, 2 warnings would be spoken, but the choice would remain. Gabriel and Cassiel rose to their feet. Their mission was clear, but the weight of it settled upon all the assembled host. The Father would not force their obedience, the Son would not shield them from choice, and the Spirit would not silence the whisper of temptation, for love is not love unless it is chosen. Far below the courts of heaven, where the light no longer reached, a storm churned in the abyss. Not a storm of wind or water, but of minds, of tempers, of doubt. The abyss was not a place. It was a wound, raw, festering, pulsing with the slow ache of those who had fallen. Lucifer could feel it. Their doubt, their growing discontent. It burned against his pride like an open wound. So he did what he did best. He spoke. Brothers. His voice was smooth, steady, woven with persuasion. We have lost much. The murmurs in the crowd rippled like a tide. Lost. Yes, they had lost their home, their joy, their purpose. Lucifer let the silence weigh upon them before he continued. But we have not lost everything. His wings stretched behind him, a vast shadow against the void. They have taken heaven from us. His voice sharpened, cutting through the murmurs. But I tell you now, we will take the earth. Some lifted their heads, others narrowed their eyes. We have watched them, he continued, pacing, the ones who have replaced us. They walk in the favor we once knew. They bask in the presence of the Almighty. His lips curled. They are loved. The word dripped with venom, and the murmur in the crowd shifted. Resentment, jealousy, rage, but they are ignorant. Lucifer's eyes burned. They know nothing of war, nothing of sorrow, nothing of loss. They stand unguarded, vulnerable. The fallen host stirred, their resentment deepening into something sharper. A weapon. Lucifer's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. If we cannot reclaim our place in heaven, then we shall claim the earth. Silence. And then, a voice. Samael, a warrior once, stepped forward. His face was grim, but his eyes held something colder than doubt. What if they do not fall? Lucifer smiled. They will. His voice was laced with certainty. Because I will make certain of it. The fallen host shifted, uncertain. Lucifer stepped forward, his voice lowering, drawing them in. If they do fall, the Almighty will have to show mercy. And if he does, his eyes flashed, then so must he show mercy to us. The weight of the words settled over them. A flicker of something dangerous rippled through the ranks. Hope, corrupt, twisted, but hope nonetheless. And in that moment, the war was decided. Lucifer had already chosen. And soon, as night fell upon Eden, the air shimmered with unseen motion. Two figures descended through the twilight, their robes woven from heaven's own light. Gabriel, Cassiel, they had come with warning. Adam and Eve sat upon a riverbank, their laughter soft, their love untouched by sorrow. They had no reason to fear, no reason to doubt. Not yet, but soon, they would have to choose. And the war that had begun in heaven would come for the earth.